Before and after the talk, we will recite sublime attitudes. Sublime attitude. May we be happy. May we be free from suffering and pain. May we be free from ill will. May we be free from oppression. May we be free from trouble. May we look after ourselves with ease. May all living beings be happy. May all living beings be free from ill will. May all living beings be free from oppression. May all living beings be free from trouble. May all living beings look after themselves with ease. May all living beings be free from all suffering and pain. May all living beings enjoy good fortune. All living beings are the owners of their actions, heir to their actions, born of their actions, related through their actions, and live dependent on their actions. Whatever they do for good or for evil, to that will they fall heir. May all beings live happily, always free from ill will. May all share in the blessings springing from the good all have done.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Day of Zen. And I would like to offer some pointers that relate to our practice as we go through these uncertain times. I would like to build up on what I have already offered in a previous talk at this online sitting that we have been conducting. A previous talk that offered guidelines from spiritual practice in a time of contagion. You may find that on our webpage if you have not been able to hear that, or you can go to YouTube and see that and take that as the background for what I will be offering for today. But let me just summarize what I had offered in that previous talk to give us a sense of where we're starting. We are in a time of uncertainty, and we are a time of isolation, and a time of pain and suffering. These 3 points, these 3 characteristics describe our current situation, and these 3 are felt by each and every one of us, each in our own different degrees from our different contexts. And I would like to precisely take these characteristics of our current situation as turning words in Zen, which I had described, a word or phrase that can be an occasion for a total transformation of our way of seeing and our way of being. And I already offered the guidelines in how we can overturn uncertainty into the certitude of justice, where we are able to live in this now in peace and in equanimity that overcomes fear and anxiety that goes with that uncertainty. And I would like to then take the second one. Instead of going into the separate existences that we are because of this measure of isolation that we feel being confined to our homes or within restricted spaces, we can turn that isolation into precisely an occasion of solidarity, from solitude to solidarity, in a way that we see how we are connected with all sentient beings who are also breathing like us. And the third, pain and suffering, which is being felt more and more from all different sides, can be either a factor that will weigh us down and discourage us and make us feel pessimistic, or as a turning word, it can precisely invite us to open our hearts in sharing that pain and suffering with all beings, to live a path of compassion, so that whatever we have, whatever I am, whatever we can do, is not something that will be for myself, centered on my own wishes or my own ambitions or my own purposes, but precisely turning it around so that I may be able to live, gifting myself to the world as a possible way of alleviating the pain and suffering that my fellow beings are experiencing at this moment. So those are the 3 points that I had described in an earlier talk. Now, what is the key to that turning word, to these 3 turning words? The turning point, the key to that turning point, I would like to note, is already known by everybody in your own way. That's what propels us in our practice in the first place. It is the breath. The breath is what allows us to really live. If we look at the way we came into this world, we announce ourselves when we came out of our mother's womb in saying, "Uha!" And that is the very first pronouncement of the breath. Here is a new being breathing with us, breathing with a whole community of sentient beings. And that's you. That's us, each and every one of us in our own way at the moment of our birth. And it is that same birth that launched us into this life that continues to sustain us, to support us right here, right now, which we receive freely and which we give back with each out breath. So that is what I'd like to focus on for today. This breath is also at the center, the focal point of our sitting practice. Zen, as you know, is a way of practicing with a posture conducive to stillness, breathing with awareness, in short, being aware of that mystery that is enveloping us, that is empowering us, that is making us all that we are, with full appreciation in every here and now. And thirdly, allowing the mind to come home to that breath where we are being called to live in that world that is timeless and boundless and beyond time and space, but not in an astral trip separating ourselves from this concrete here and now, but precisely as grounded in this here and now, in this world with all its pains and sufferings, in this veil of tears, and yet grounded in something that will not throw us off or will make us fear and be anxious, but precisely give us a grounding, an anchor to embrace that world and allow us to give ourselves back to it as a gift. So the breath, that power which launched us into being in the first place and continues to sustain us now. It is ironical or perhaps poignant to know that this coronavirus that we are all being threatened by in some way or other, I don't know if any one of you already are feeling some symptoms or whether you are still in a place where you are able to protect yourself, which is fine. So we hope everybody is in a state of well-being and will continue to be so. But if you have had some contact, our hope is that we will all go through this together and come back to the fullness of the breath. But the irony, the poignant fact is that this virus is something that can deprive us of that freedom to breathe. You may have read of what happens in someone who contracts this virus. And the main point of attack is the lungs. And the person who is struggling with this virus finds it hard to breathe and eventually can die of precisely a respiratory failure through either pneumonia or through some other cause, but with the effect of the virus. So this is what the virus is threatening to take away from us. So this practice is precisely what we can take on, and which we can open ourselves to let us know that the breath is always there. Even when we die, it is the breath that will lift us into that realm of the timeless. If we recall Jesus dying on the cross, the last word he spoke was, "Into thy hands I commend my breath. I entrust my breath to you. And now I am lifted up into the realm of the timeless, the eternal, the infinite." So it is that moment when we lift ourselves to that world of the timeless that we know there is no death. Our tears will be wiped away. And yet, as Jesus showed also in his figure on the resurrection, the pain and suffering was still there with him. The wounds on his hands and on his feet, the wound on his side, show that that risen one, that one that has arrived at that world of the timeless and the boundless, continues to bear the suffering of the suffering people and lifts us all up so that we may realize that in the midst of all of this, we are invited to open up to that realm that is timeless and boundless without leaving this concrete context in which we are located. So now this breath is precisely where we are invited to continue to turn to in a very, very practical way. As we sit here, it is the breath that we turn to as our point of focus. And we all know the basics. We sit with a posture conducive to stillness. We breathe in, breathe out, and allow the breath to cleanse us, to overpower us. We allow the breath to permeate through every pore of our being and allow ourselves to be taken up by the breath. So it is simply a matter of allowing the breath to be the central power that governs my life. And that happens most intimately so as we sit here in stillness, just entrusting ourselves upon each breath. Even without thinking about the breath conceptually or intellectually, as we entrust ourselves to it with every breath, and as we simply lose that little self that is trying to control, that is trying to manage, or that is afraid, or that is comparing and so on, to simply return to the breath, then all is still. And it is only the breath that envelops the whole universe, that envelops me, and I realize that I am one with the whole universe. Again, taking an angle from the Jewish and the Christian traditions, in the story of creation that we find in the book of Genesis, we see how it is the breath, the ruach of the divine, the ruach of the loving infinite one who brought out all beings out of nothingness into the fullness of what they are, with all the mountains and the trees and the stars and the heavens, as well as the dogs and cats and bugs and cattle and all the living beings, and of course human beings. It is the ruach that hovered over all this creation, over all this universe, empowering it, putting each thing in its place, and allowing us to live as a community, as a body together, breathing together. So that is what we can taste as we sit here in stillness, breathing in and breathing out. As we center our being on this breath in the sitting, we will be assured, we will know that we are in good hands, and we will get the sense of what Julian of Norwich must have meant when she exclaimed out of her depth of experience of losing herself in this world of love and mystery that is empowered by the breath. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. Let those words come home to us and give us that assurance that no matter what happens through all of this, all shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. You may ask, but what if I get the disease? Or what if I die? Or my provisions are running out? I've lost my job. We don't have any food in the pantry. Those are things that we are, of course, liable to be anxious about. So, in the midst of that, we are invited to simply take a breath, come back to the breath, let the breath empower us and give us that sense that as we continue to do what we can in the midst of our limited situation, still we will be able to do it with that sense of equanimity and peace that we are prepared for no matter what. So if we are able to go about our business and look for our and everybody else's needs from that place of equanimity rather than from a heart of, or rather from a situation of anxious panic, then we can be more creative as to how we can live in a way that makes the best of what we are placed in. So that is the first point I would like to offer. Return to the breath, return home. And this is where we find that we are beyond the physical and temporal limitations that we see our physical being in. To return to the breath is to return to that realm that we call the spiritual. The spiritual is the very core of our very being that allows us to touch the beyond, the transcendent. And in touching the transcendent, we also open our hearts to the connectedness with everything and everyone that is enveloped in that beyond, in that transcendent, namely everyone and everything that exists, namely all of you, all of the earth, all of the universe. And that is where we find our home in, together. So we are at home wherever we are, whatever we do, no matter what. So how then can we continue to reconnect with the breath? Some practical points. In our day-to-day life, as we go about our business, doing our tasks, some of us who are fortunate in continuing with our jobs and getting our financial support, even as we stay home and do our work through the internet or through other means, we can only be grateful. And as we do so, as we, for example, connect with our computer, every so now and then, just take a deep breath and realize that, again, I am connected with everyone and everything, and I am doing my share in helping in whatever we can do to alleviate one another's pain and suffering. So as we do the routine things of our day-to-day job, like cooking, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, tending to the garden, and this may be a good opportunity to do those things that we are normally too busy to do on our day-to-day life. We are now able to pay more attention to these little minute things that make our life what it is. And with that, we are able to find gratitude in these little simple ways of just being around the household and being grateful for everything we are given. So with that, then, the second is a practical point. Just allow ourselves to keep returning to this breath throughout the day. Of course, we devote a certain time, dedicated time, to sitting in stillness, paying attention to the breath, and allowing the mind to be still. And so beyond those dedicated times, then as we go through our 24-hour day, 7 days a week, to keep returning to the breath, to develop the habit of returning to the breath, will give us that sense that we can live in this historical time with these very severe challenges in a way that is beyond the limitations of time and space, and in a way that can give us true peace and equanimity that will enable our hearts to be open with a little more sense of welcoming of others rather than feeling threatened by others because they might infect me with a virus and so on. So that we can really smile at people when we're walking around the streets and we see people also walking our way. We can wave to them and say, okay, 6 feet apart. And we smile at one another and take all of this with that light heart that we're all in this together. Now, a third point, which will be a little more intricate, coming back to this practice of sitting still that we are privileged to be able to do at the times that we can in our day-to-day life. As we lose ourselves in this breath, breathing in and breathing out, and as we allow the breath to take over our whole being and really permeate through each and every pore of our being, we can experience a healing of our separatedness from the earth, from our natural world, which we human beings from the modern age, from the industrial age on, have tended to take for granted and thereby exploit the earth for our own selfish human needs, not realizing that whatever we do to the earth, we do to ourselves because we are intimately connected. So it is in recovering that intimate connectedness with nature that we can really rejoice and also mourn in the woundedness of earth that we see now. Secondly, we can also heal heal our separation from one another as we see that beings that are different from me, from my little own family or social nexus, we would normally tend to put as those others. We are able to bridge that separation from the so-called other and realize that they are us and I am them, and our fates, our destinies are all interconnected. And so in accepting that interconnectedness with everyone else, my heart is filled with compassion for all. And thirdly, I am able to recover and heal the separatedness that I have been in within my own self, projecting an image of an idealized me, always trying to meet up to it, and my true self, that who I am, and realizing that those are not separate. And in so doing, we heal those three basic wounds of separateness in our own selves, between ourselves and nature, between ourselves and our fellow beings, and between myself in this world of subject-object, and my true self. When we heal that, then we come to this wounded world as a wounded healer, knowing that we know the source of wholeness that we can all return to in this simple practice of coming home to the breath. Enough of words. I'd like to invite us to just pause for a minute and recover that place where we are all one with the breath. For 1 minute, let us do so, and then I will close this talk with my gesture of gratitude to everyone, and the bell will be rung, and then we can have our forum for sharing. So let us pause for 1 minute and allow this breath to enter and be welcomed into our hearts and permeate our whole being, and entrust ourselves upon that breath together.
beings be happy. May all living beings be free from ill will. May all living beings be free from oppression. May all living beings be free from struggle.